Hello, it's Bohdan Nahaylo, the chief editor of Kyiv Post, and we have another interview lined up for you with a very interesting guest. Today we have a sportsman, a basketball player who defected from what was then the Soviet Union, ended up playing in America and many other countries, became a businessman after getting significant academic qualifications in that area, and more recently has been very active in promoting Ukraine's issues and problems in the States, and particularly in areas where it's not so easy to do, like Louisiana. He'll explain in a while how all this came about. So I'm very pleased to welcome today Roman Rubchenko. Roman, if I can say that to you, because I understand you were born in Ukraine. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in the States.
Thank you very much for having me, Bohdan. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, you are correct. I was born in Ukraine, but at the time, Ukraine at the time was part of the Soviet Union. So a third of my life I spent under the Soviet regime with all the niceties that came with it. But at the age of 17, on a trip in the United States to play in a basketball tournament, my buddy and I stole our passports from the overseer that was traveling with us. We think he was a KGB agent. And we walked out of JFK Airport at 5 o'clock in the morning on August 10th, 1991.
You weren't afraid at that age?
Well, I think at that age you're not capable of being afraid.
But did you know English?
No, I did not know any English. Misha, my friend Misha Sidorov, he knew a little bit of English. We had $120 in our pocket and we did not know anybody, but we thought we were on top of the world.
So what, you use sign language?
Well, I mean, this is New York, right? So we were in New York. We relied on Misha's skills, his few words that he knew in order to get around a little bit. Naturally, I wanted to see the skyscrapers because I've been in the States for about a week by then, and I have not seen, I mean, as you know, America is 2 stories.
And what was the first reaction of the authorities? They believed you, or were they skeptical?
Well, at the time, if you remember, this was the very tail end of the Cold War, but nobody knew that the Soviet Union was coming to its demise. So the attitude was very receptive. It was tons of lawyers in Brighton Beach. That's where we ended up. Tons of lawyers that you could just come in. It's almost like oil change, like file for political asylum. It was a very simple process, and it took almost no time.
You were a basketball player. How did you find a place, a team that would take you, a job?
Well, while it's true that the reason I was able to make it to the United States was due to basketball, it wasn't true at all that I had a clear path ahead of me how I'm going to leverage basketball in order to make it happen in the United States. Right after defection, we probably spent about 2 months in Brighton Beach, bumming around, doing various jobs, just trying to survive, basically. In 1991, 400,000 people from the former Soviet Union came to the United States and did not go back, so we were dime a dozen. The good thing was that we were 6'9", both of us were, and we were sort of like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. It's an interesting story, and people would take interest in who we are and why are we here. And so it just so happened that at the time, there was a basketball player playing for the Atlanta Hawks, Alexander Volkov. He's a Ukrainian. He was the first Soviet player that was invited to play in the NBA. There was also Arvydas Sabonis and Šarūnas Marčiulionis, but Alexander Volkov was the first one. And so through the Brighton Beach grapevine, he heard that 2 fools are walking around Brighton Beach telling everybody that they're going to be the future of Ukrainian basketball in the United States. So he reached out to us. I guess our background checked out because we went to the same specialized Olympic Reserve School here in Kyiv. It's called Kyiv Olympic Reserve Academy or something like that. Basically, it's a school where you just practiced and your school work was structured around you're preparing for the future battles on the basketball court or whatever sport.
So where did you end up? Who took you?
So thanks to help from Sasha, we were introduced to a nice person from the NBA by the name of Kim Bahuni, and she was able to help us get scholarships to prep schools in Connecticut so we can go play basketball and learn English. I did that for about a year. I was a junior at the time in that school, but I already had graduated from a high school here in Ukraine. And so when the opportunity came 1 year into it to join a university, I jumped on it and became a Tiger.
A tiger. Explain that to a Brit.
All right, all right. So every university in the United States has a mascot, basically some animal or some sort of persona that represents that school. Louisiana State University's mascot is the Mike the Tiger. And so it was a coincidence because I was going to school in Connecticut, and I went and I played in the summer league during the summer of 1992. It was an ABCD camp put up by Sani Vaccaro, where 100 top players from the United States who were juniors would gather and play in front of a bunch of coaches. And I guess I had a little bit of talent, and I played well enough, and a bunch of schools were interested in me, including UConn, which was located...
But how were you accepted by the players, by management, from the former Soviet Union by now? Did you feel any kind of hesitation in embracing you and taking you on board?
Well, United States is a very sports-centric culture. They love their athletes. And so no matter who you are, as long as you can play a popular sport well, you're good enough. So it helped me tremendously to open up the doors, to make connections, to build, lay foundations for future relationships through basketball. So if I played, let's say, a sport that was less popular in the United States, I mean, I don't know, let's say cricket, right? Probably my path would be quite different.
Look, we could talk for ages about your sports career because it flourished, and you played not only in the States but in many other teams. But let's move on now, jump ahead to how you got your business academic qualifications, how you retooled, as it were, and moved from sports into, I won't call it academia, but let's say the real world.
So while playing basketball for Dale Brown at Louisiana State University, I knew that basketball is not the end goal for me. I mean, I knew I wanted to do other things later on, but I was going to squeeze as much as I could out of basketball. So I majored in international trade and finance, I graduated, and then I took an opportunity to play professionally. And so unlike most of the players who like to play in one country or one team and try to win championships and get accolades, my goal was to see the world. And so I tried to play in a different country every year of my career. I played 8 years professionally. All of them were in different countries, different
For example?
teams. I started in Turkey, then I ended up in Uruguay, Israel, Spain, France, Portugal, Poland, Belgium. During that time, I also played for the national team, Ukrainian men's national team.
Oh, I've heard of Flying Dutchman, but this is Flying Ukrainians.
Yeah. It's funny because one of my best friends who played with me at LSU was Gert Hammack. He was from Holland. And the original Flying Dutchman in basketball world was Rick Smith that played for the Indiana, and they were calling him version 2. So
Okay, so you've made it now in the business world. You've got your academic qualifications. What brought you back to Ukraine?
Well, so I played for 8 years professionally, and then I realized that I am done with this. I'm bored. I'm not learning anything else. So now I would like to go and rejoin, or shall I say, join the corporate world. Well, my degree 8 years later was not really useful anymore because I haven't really worked in that field. So I needed to go back to school. So I applied to MBA programs, and I went to Michigan to get my MBA. And while there, I decided that the most attractive career path for me would be strategy consultant because of the variety of work, because of unpredictable problems, because of very dynamic pace and competitive environment. And it was kind of close to my heart because of my professional sports background. And so BCG, Boston Consulting Group, just happened to open up an office in Kyiv back then. And I decided what a better thing to do is to combine my experience and skills and go back to Ukraine. I've never lived in independent Ukraine, and come back to my country and help it realize its potential. And
this is during what
This is 2008. 2008. Mm-hmm. And
yes.
so after 17 years, so basically my life could be broken into 3 parts. One, living under the oppressive regime of the Soviet Union. One, living in the democratic world in the Western Europe and United States, learning to see the world through the prism of freedom and choice and democracy and basically the democratic values. And then the third part, I lived in the democratic Ukraine from 2001 until 2008 until now.
But are Ukraine still in transition?
Yes. Well,
it's still some of the growing up pains.
Yes.
Your first impressions, were you surprised? Were you disillusioned? Were you encouraged? What were your first sort of responses to being back in your native land?
It felt like I never left. There's something in the air. I can't explain it. I can't put my finger on it. But having lived in 11 different countries and traveled to 60, I've seen the variety, but I never had that feeling like I would as soon as I would land at Borispol. There's something here that kind of makes it home for me, right? And so when I first came in, that was a surprising feeling to me. And the other one was I was struggling with communication because I forgot all my languages. I thought in English, I spoke English, and so it was very difficult first year even to remember Russian because I grew up in a Russian-speaking family.
So we've heard of Englishmen in New York. You
Yeah.
were a Ukrainian,
Yeah, exactly.
an alien in Kyiv.
Yep. So it took me a little while to kind of get going because people would understand that I was not local the way I was speaking at the time.
Okay, let's move forward because time is running out. What are you doing now? How are you helping Ukraine?
Well, since the 17 years that I spent in the United States, majority of that time was in Louisiana and Texas. I'm quite familiar with the local culture. Louisiana is sort of my home away from home. And I have a great friend there in the name of my coach, Dale Brown, who is Mr. Basketball in Louisiana, for whom I came to play. He has been very concerned since the war started about my well-being. He's always asking me to come live with him. He's asking what can he do for me, whatnot. And he sort of motivated me to try to leverage the connections that I have right now to help Ukrainian cause. As you know, the military aid package from the United States to Ukraine is stuck for about 5 months now in Congress. Even though the votes are available, the leadership of the Congress will not bring that bill to a vote. And so it was my understanding that any kind of advocacy for Ukraine would be very useful, especially in that in that part of the United States, because it's not a secret that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, he is from Louisiana, District Number 4. The leader of the Republicans in Congress is Steve Scalise. He's from District Number 1 in New Orleans. Both of them are alumni of LSU. Mr. Johnson was going to school, the law school, while I was playing basketball for Dale Brown. And so I felt that it's a serendipitous coincidence that I should probably try to leverage this and try to inform the people of Louisiana. What I think Ukraine is doing right now, we are fighting to be able to live a democratic way of life, right? And what does it mean? That means that the government works for you. You can pick up a phone, call your representative's office and express your desire, what you want them to do, and they're supposed to act on your behalf. And so what I'm imploring Louisianians to do right now, I'm informing them about the true situation in Ukraine right now, because the war did not stop, even though the news cycle sort of kind of like moved on to different topics. We still have people dying, we still have shellings, we still have missile attacks. We still need aid, we need ammunition for our guns. But it's out of sight, out of mind for Americans, you know.
So is it an uphill battle, or do you have some success?
Well, I think I spent 3 weeks there, both Shreveport, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. And to my pleasant surprise, everyone is supportive of Ukraine. The problem that I've noticed is that it's not an urgent position. There are other issues that people are worried about. You have an election cycle coming up, you have immigration problems, you have opposite views being spewed from the TV stations, you know, left and right, and so it's confusing. There's a lot of things going on, and it's very difficult to focus your attention on a conflict that's 2 years old and 10,000 kilometers away, 6,000 miles away. So what I was trying to do is I was trying to put the human face to whatever they're reading in newspapers or seeing on the news, leverage some of the recognition that I still enjoy there because of my basketball years in Louisiana, and try to inform people and to ask them to contact their representatives, to call the Speaker Johnson's office and express clear desire for him to introduce this bill as soon as possible, because every day is life and death situation for us.
Well, I listen to you and I seem to think that your next leap is going to be into politics. You have that way of presenting information and conveying messages. Let's hope that you're successful in that area too.
Well, I think politics is a very mixed bag of tricks. I'm not sure if I'm cut out for that kind of thing. Business is much more predictable.
And tricks in basketball?
Yeah,
No tricks?
well, I mean, but that's a game. That's a game.
Okay.
So I think politics is probably premature. But what I would like to do is that because I do speak the language, I understand the culture, and I'm intimately familiar with both places, I think I'm uniquely positioned to build this bridge and try to inform people in Louisiana and even Texas. Maybe on my next trip I will try to do the Texas.
Well, thank you for your commitment, your energy, your insights. I've been talking to Roman Rubchenko, a sportsman turned businessman turned, what shall I say, attorney for Ukraine down in Louisiana, and not only. Thank you very much for visiting our studios and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me, Bohdan. It's very important for me to have a chance to communicate my message to as wide of an audience as I can.
Thank you.
Thank you.